cartels are too big. One good thing about big cartels, nobody steals them. So one has to become expert in playing as if they were little. Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tera Vanachari Jamuna Tera Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tera Vanachari Jamuna Tera Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Jaya Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Parivajika Jaya Asto Tarasati Śrīmad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vindiki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Vamsika Hosi Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasari Gaura Bhakta Vindiki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinatha Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhanake Sri Vrindavan Dham ki, Sri Mayapur Navadvip Dham ki, Sri Purushottam Chetra ki, Sri Ganga Mai ki jai, Sri Jumuna Mai ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Tulsi Devi Maharani ki jai, Harinam Sankirtana ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to C.C. Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishwaraya Krishna Stabile Sanipani Janta Purichana Manani Namo Vishwaraya Krishna Stabile Smari Bhaktivedanta Samachana Manani Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Macharana Nidasesha Nivadi Pasachate Satarane. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we're reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 9, Liberation, Chapter 19, King Yayati achieves liberation, takes 27 and 28. Let's just chant the 27. Sa sanivasam suridam prapayam ivagatschatam vigyayeshvara tantranam maya virachitam prabhu. Sa sanivasam suridam prapayam ivagatschatam vigyayeshvara tantranam maya virachitam prabhu. Sasanivasam suridam prapayam ivagatschatam vigyayeshvara tantranam maya virachitam prabhu. Sasanivasam suridam prapayam ivagatschatam vigyayeshvara tantranam maya virachitam prabhu. Sasanivasam suridam prapayam ivagatschatam vigyayeshvara tantranam maya virachitam prabhu. Sasanivasam suridam prapayam ivagatschatam vigyayeshvara tantranam maya virachitam prabhu. Ladies? Sasanivasam suridam prapayam ivagatschatam vigyayeshvara tantranam maya virachitam prabhu. Sasanivasam suridam prapayam ivagatschatam vigyayeshvara tantranam maya virachitam prabhu. Sa Devayani Sanivasam, living in the association Suridam of friends and relatives. Prapayam eva, like gachatam, of tourists on a program from going from one place to another. Vigaya, understanding. Ishvara tantranam, under the influence of the rigid laws of nature. Maya virachitam, the laws enforced by Maya, the illusory energy, Prabhu, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thereafter, Devayani, the daughter of Śrīmad understood that the materialistic association of husband, friends and relatives is like the association in a hotel full of tourists. The relationships of society, friendship and love are created by the Maya of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, exactly as in a dream. By the grace of Krishna, Devayani gave up her imaginary position in the material world. Completely fixing her mind upon Krishna, she achieved liberation from the gross and subtle bodies. Purport. One should be convinced that he is a spirit soul, part and parcel of the Supreme Brahman Krishna, but has somehow or other been entrapped by the material coverings of the gross and subtle bodies, consisting of earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. One should know that the association of society, friendship, love, nationalism, religion, and so on are nothing but creations of Maya. One's only business is to become Krishna conscious and render service unto Krishna as extensively as possible for a living being. In this way, one is liberated from material bondage. By the grace of Krishna, Devayani attained this state through the instructions of her husband. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmaye Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamahiyam Tadati Svapadantikam Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Gudim Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam. There are a number of interesting images, thoughts, images, concepts, I guess, ideas that arise out of this conversation between Maharaj Yayati and Devayani. And Maharaj Yayati is a very interesting example of someone who became completely entrapped or completely enamored, let's say completely enamored by the desires for material enjoyment, basically. The focus of his existence was to enjoy with his wife, effectively, Devayani. And as a result of that attachment, he was cursed, right, by Śrīmad, his father-in-law. And that curse was to lose his youth, and so therefore the opportunity for enjoyment. And that was very frustrating for him, completely frustrating. But he sought the benediction from Śrīmad that if he could get someone to take his old age, then he could continue to enjoy. And so he was able to convince Puru, his son, to take his old age. In other words, Puru didn't mind giving up the convenience of youth for old age in order to please his father, so very dedicated son. And we'll hear about Puru, the qualities of Puru, next chapter, I think, of the Bhagavatam talks about the qualities. So a very and the interesting thing about pretty much all of these personalities in this section of the Bhagavatam is that they're great devotees. Even Maharaj Yayati, who had been completely consumed in this pursuit of material enjoyment, more or less came to his senses with the, Prabhupada explains this in the Bhagavad Gita. There are natural sequences of life, right? So these things can be observed by anyone. What are some of the natural sequences of life that you could think of? Natural sequences. Change of the body, yes. Tahinosmin yata dehe. What is it? Komaram jovanam jara. Natural sequence. What's another natural sequence that we experience every day? Huh? The modes of material nature. Yes, more simple than that. What's some natural sequences? Huh? Eating, sleeping. Yes, why not? Yep. What else? Aging. How about just day and night? Huh? Weekday, weekend. Right? In natural sequences. Yeah. And so the characteristics of the qualities of those natural sequences are observable by anybody. You don't have to be a great saint or a sage or a great scholar even to observe these natural sequences. And it's interesting how important actually having the human form of life is. Because even, for example, if you are born an animal, you're stuck with that for the whole of your life. And by the constraints that places naturally upon us, upon the living entity. Right? Or even in the lower species of life, like plants, or even fish, considered very, very, very low birth. But in a human form of life, even if one becomes entrapped by the modes of material nature and the circumstance that one finds oneself in, just like here, Maharaj Yayati was completely enamored by his facility as a king, and as a result of being a very powerful and influential king, he was able to enjoy so much material facility, right? But despite that, despite the fact that he was entrapped, if you like, by the senses and the mind, right? Still, because of the fact that he was endowed with the human form of life, and along with that, the ability for introspection, right? There's a quality of the use of intelligence, effectively, that comes with the human form of life. He was able to understand the futility of his pursuit of sense gratification. And there's another element to this. It's interesting, according to the Vedic culture or the Vedic construct, there was a great deal of care and attention placed on matching a boy and a girl for marriage. Right? Very interesting. Actually, I was talking to one of my friends. We were at a wedding reception last night. Which is, I guess, an appropriate situation for those of us who are community members. Marriage is inevitable, for most of us anyway. And ostensibly a good match. We hope so, anyway. So one of my friends was telling me, we were talking about divorce, and he told me that a country like Australia, there's something like 30% of marriages end in divorce. Right? That's a third. That's a lot, right? And I said, what about India? He said 1%. Right? 1%. Of course, 1% of 1.5 billion is still a lot of failed marriages. But still, it's interesting to note there's a great deal of care taken in matching the compatibility of the boy and the girl so that they support each other, right? And of course, the importance of matching is illustrated here, because Devayani had a great deal of respect and affection and a matched intelligence of that of a partner, of a husband, right? So when the husband, Yayati, has, and you know, this is in terms of natural sequences, this is taking place at which stage of their life? Hands up if you think you know at what stage of life Yayati and Devayani are at. Hands up if you think you know, or if you know. Nobody knows. One person. Everybody knows. That's why they're not putting their hands up, huh? Just lazy. Are you lazy? Or do you know? Sibya, what stage of life? Yeah, they're elderly. Yeah, they're elderly. And so, because of the, they're both well matched. So when the husband is at a point of self-realization, so his wife was also at a similar stage of advancement, right? Spiritual advancement. So it's not just material matching, but also that sense of self-realization, which is important. Devayani didn't say, no, I'm not interested in renunciation, I want more sense gratification. Right? Or even when the husband was inclined towards sense gratification, she didn't say, oh, no, time for self-realization. Right? So we can see a good match, so that when Maharaj Jayati is at the point of self-realization and he's revealing, right? Guyam Makyati Prichati, he's revealing his internal realizations. And that is, all of this, even though their marriage, in one sense, can be determined as successful from a material perspective, when Maharaj Jayati is at the point where he's realizing this is all just a waste of time. Right? This is all just a waste of time. And how does he describe it? Or how does she realize it? That's what she's realizing, that marriage and family life is like a bus stop. Basically, a bus stop. Or here, what's the word? Let me have a quick look. Prapayam eva gachatam. A place where water is supplied, right? Interesting. Prapayam. So, when you're traveling, I remember once we drove, you've probably heard this story before, but anyway, funny story. We drove from, for some reason the devotees had arranged this travel from Mayapur to Puri. Mayapur to Puri. And by bus. I can tell you now, this is the wrong way to go to Puri. Okay, a taxi to Calcutta is probably the best. If you want to get from Mayapur to Calcutta, you can go to Krishnanagar and get a train to Calcutta. You can do it that way. That's generally not the best. But of course, they're trying to save money, because there was 80 devotees travelling. And we're travelling in those buses. I don't know, have you ever travelled in India by bus? And the buses have got wooden seats? Whew. And they're not built for Australian bodies. They're built for Indian bodies, and they're not as wide. So they have 2 seats and then 3 seats. And wooden. Oh, it was torture. And we had breakfast on the first day, and it took us over 32 hours. So it took us, a day and a half to get from Mayapur to Jagannath Puri. And there were devotees who were sick. They were lying on the floor. It was a disaster zone. But every now and again we would stop. And by the end of the first day, and we'd only had breakfast, or the next day, we'd only had breakfast the day before, it was a relief to get a drink of water. Right? And it was a relief to get something to eat. But we couldn't. You couldn't trust any of you couldn't trust any of the food anywhere effectively, right? So what we were eating was papadums, which you can't eat now because it's Kartik, right? No urad dal, and cucumbers with pepper and salt. Right? So the next day we'd stop on the roadside, and then immediately there'd be the cucumber sellers. But that was it was like, whoa, cucumber never tasted so good with salt and pepper, and the dry papadums off the side of the road. So in a bus stop there is a certain amount of relief, right? You can have a drink and you can eat some cucumbers, but it's just temporary. It's just there's no real solace in eating a cucumber. So similarly also, household life is like there's a certain amount of shelter. There's a certain amount of shelter in family life, and that's why it's recommended. But it's not a permanent location where one can stay and be comfortable forever. So Devayani has heard the transcendental instructions from her husband, and she's also come to she has a similar realization that family, friendship, society, love, these things, interestingly, are required for most people, but it's just a temporary way station on a greater journey. And of course, that greater journey is to take advantage of the human form of life. What is it? Na sato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataha. Those who are learned, those who are in knowledge, see the temporality of the body, right? It doesn't last. Nasat, still green. Nasato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataha. And there's no cessation, so the body is always limited and temporary and doesn't endure. Whereas the soul, the spirit soul, is constant, even throughout all of the changes. Right? So the journey of the human form of life is, in youth, there's a certain amount of sense gratification, and done according to religious principles is appropriate. This is one of Krishna's messages in the Bhagavad Gita, because Arjuna says, I'm going to go and live in the forest. This fighting is too troublesome. But and in one sense, it's a reasonable argument. Arjuna can see the consequences of the war between the Kauravas and the Pandavas. And so he wanted to renounce. But of course, Krishna says, this is not actually very practical, because repression doesn't accomplish anything. Right? This is why for most people, marriage is the appropriate path on the journey of life, if you like. Of course, if ideally, if one can naturally avoid that entanglement, that's the best. But for most people, that's and even we can see Arjuna is an elevated devotee, and so yet, even though he's such he's a Nitya Siddha Bhakta, right, devotee, Partha-Sarati, Krishna's friend, right? Arjuna is Krishna's friend. Yet still, Krishna, and he's promoting renunciation, and what does Krishna say? What does Krishna say to Arjuna's promotion of renunciation? Bhakti Shah, what does Krishna say? Yeah, rubbish. This is not a good idea for you. Huh? Yeah. So what can repression accomplish? And in one sense, he's fighting, he's killing, he's destroying the enemy. And you know, the horrors of warfare are well understood, yet Krishna is encouraging him to fight. Because it's ultimately part of Krishna's plan. So, Maharaj Yayati and Devayani have both come to this, arrived at the same conclusion as part of the natural sequences of their life, and have arrived at that point of renunciation. And this is the advantage of the human form of life. Even though there may be a stage of life where one experiences and can enjoy the station of householder life, still that doesn't mean because of that engagement that one's then trapped or bound by that situation. And that's why vanaprastha and then the later stage of sannyas is recommended, because it's within that stage of life that one can come to these realizations. And one is mature enough to have realized the inadequacy and the limitations of material existence, but still has the intelligence and the energy to pursue self-realization. And we can see here this mature renunciation of Devayani, and she's come to the same conclusion as Yayati, that this material existence is, there may be some shelter. That's why they're called ashrams, right? Ashram means a place of shelter. So there's some shelter in householder life, but it's just like a bus stop. One shouldn't become too attached and too comfortable. And the material energy will ensure that this happens, that one doesn't become too comfortable in household life. And one should then understand the real purpose. Prabhupada says here, the real purpose of existence is to maintain and establish and maintain our relationship with Krishna. That's the most important achievement, and one which is afforded in the human form of life, even if one is a householder. Right? More dangerous, there's more opportunity for attachment and sense gratification. But if one follows the natural sequences of existence, one will eventually come to the point of giving these things up. So, this is Devayani's realization. The relationships of society, friendship and love are created by the Maya of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, exactly as in a dream. Well, exactly as in a dream. Swapna opamyena. What? Sarvatra sangam utsrijya. Swapna pamyena bhargavi. And so what does she do? Krishna mana samaveshya. She's turned to Krishna. Samaveshya vyadhu noti. Lingam atmana. So giving up attachment to the body, she's turning her attention now to Krishna, which is effectively what we're encouraged to do, even if we're in householder life, which means there's a certain amount of sense gratification or engagement of the senses with the objects of the senses, but under the auspices of bhakti and sadhana bhakti, one is protected so that the engagements in life are still connected with and focused on Krishna. And as a consequence, then, as a result of living a pious life, that's a life of piety, then one comes out of that natural sequence of existence into a stage of life where one is more introspective and can completely detach oneself from the sense gratification of, here in this case, being a king, being a husband and wife, being a powerful and influential person. Now they're stepping back and concentrating on their devotional service, effectively. So, great example of self-realization, and also a good example of how a well-matched couple are supportive at various stages of life, and especially at the last stage of life, the natural phase of renunciation. Okay, does anybody have any comments or questions? My stomach's rumbling. So that means it must be breakfast time, huh? Who cooked the feast last night for the wedding reception? Do you know? He did a pretty good job. Except his koftas were a bit too much. The Chincharipa said too much flour in the koftas, so they're a bit hard. They would have had to have been soaked in the sauce for a long time to be soft. But it's pretty good. It was really good, actually. Okay. Nobody's got any thoughts, realizations they can share? What did you think of the feast, Prajaraj? He didn't hear me. Okay. Kantaraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai, Maharaj Yayati ki jai, Devayani Mataji ki jai.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari. Jaya Para